for a few moments, we're going to jump back in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 13. As we look again at some end-time events. Remember, again, the next thing we're looking forward to is the rapture. That mansion so bright that was spoken of there. And as Casting Crowns sang, that glorious day when he calls us with the sound of the trumpet and the voice telling us to come up here. And we're looking forward to that. And as I was teasing Ron, it could happen any day, right, Ron? Could be today. We don't know, but we know it's coming. Just as the other things that the Lord said happened. And again, we'll be caught up to meet the Lord in the air. And 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and we looked at verses 13 through 18 there, where we get that word rapture, that word caught up. And then, after that, comes a period of time of judgment and purging and punishment on the nation of Israel. Along with the nation of Israel, so will those who dwell on the earth. Those who are unsaved will be persecuted, and the ones that get saved will be persecuted during this terrible, horrific time. The disciples have asked some questions, and Jesus is answering them. And they had asked these questions about what will be the sign that they're about to be fulfilled of the things you just told us, a temple coming down, which happened in AD 70. And what will be the sign of your coming? Now, how did they understand that he would be coming? He's already what? He's already there. He's talking to them, so he's going to tell them what's going to be the sign of his second coming. Remember, that's when he comes upon this earth. Zechariah, when he goes on Mount Olives and it splits in half, and he sets up the millennial kingdom. Because the Jewish elite have rejected their Messiah, the anointed one, the one who's coming to set up the kingdom. And so they understand that something's happening and he's coming back. What will be the sign of the end of the age? And remember, Jews are looking for a sign. And we'll see that sign, as he is going to describe it here in Matthew 13, is the tribulation period. The first 13 verses cover the first half of that 7-year period, which is half of 7 is what? 3.5. And then you'll also see that the verses from 14 to 20 are the second half of that tribulation, which is the worst half. And he'll tell you how you know that second half is coming. And again, we looked at the direct correlation between Mark 13 and Revelation chapter 6, as Jesus tells about those 4 horsemen. And we looked at that. And Israel, as we'll see in Daniel, is under a covenant for 7 years, the 70th week of Daniel. That white horse, the rider on the white horse went out and conquered, even though he had a bow, but he had no arrows. I'm going to tell you, when Ron goes deer hunting, he's going to take arrows for his bow. And we see that he sets up a peace covenant with the nation of Israel, and that will be peaceful for a little while, then it disintegrates, and by the middle of that tribulation period, it falls apart. And so Israel's under that covenant with the Antichrist. Like I said, he could be alive today. We don't know that, but he could be. And he will come in, he will captivate people by his personality, his charisma. He's deceptive, remember? It's just like green grass growing over a septic tank. That's exactly what kind of person he is. He's going to tell you all the things he wants to hear, you want to hear, but he has a personal agenda, a vendetta against God and the things of God. And that's the Antichrist. He will be empowered by Satan himself, or as John Hill used to call him, smutty face. starts out that time of peace. And you know, that's what Satan promises. He promises good things, but it never lasts. And you know, a Hebrew writer says, sin's fun for a season till you get to payday, right? There's always a payday for sin. And Jesus said in those first 13 verses, there's going to be rumors of wars, natural catastrophes, famine, pestilences, and it's all working its way to Israel. Israel will become the focus. And there's still a lot of focus on Israel. There's lots of things happening over there. And even God bringing them and making them a nation again, right? And He's not done with Israel, just as He's not done with us. And persecution starts taking place over religious activities. We'll see that during the temple, or during the tribulation period, the temple is built again. As I shared that first Sunday, the stuff's already there. All the furnishings and all those things they've already made, and they have it stored away. For one day that temple is going to be, and the Antichrist is going to agree to that. And he's going to let them start out with their religious activities. But he's got an agenda, as we'll see. He has an agenda. And we'll answer that question as we go on. What is the sign of the end of the age? So starting in verse 14 and of Mark 13, we read, so when you visibly see this take place, the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down into the house, nor enter to take anything out of his house. And let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in the winter. Yeah, amen, right? And so he says, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, Matthew 24:15, that correlating passage, Matthew 24, then also in Luke 21. So when you see standing in the holy place, the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. So he says, you're going to see something standing in the holy place. And we'll see, hopefully as we go along, that one day there will be a statue, a big statue standing in the middle of the holy place. It's evil statue, and Satan's going to allow the Antichrist to cause this statue to speak. And it says either you bow down and worship Satan, or your head will be severed. Just like Nebuchadnezzar. Remember Nebuchadnezzar back there with the big statue, and he wanted everyone to worship him. He asked Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel to bow down, but they said what? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego says, no, we will not. And they were thrown into the fiery furnace. We see those things as pictures of what's coming to place, and we'll show you that from the scriptures. Standing in the holy place, so it has to be rebuilt, right in the middle of the temple, and the holy, maybe even of the Holy of Holies. Remember, there was a curtain that divided that, and only the priest could go back to the Holy of Holies. And we'll see that that's all reinstituted during the 7-year period. They go back under the law, and they're offering sacrifices and all these kind of things happening at the temple, as I understand from scriptures. Spoken of by Daniel the prophet. I want you to turn with me back there just a minute to Daniel chapter 8. And we'll look at a couple passages here in Daniel. Really, if you want to understand end-time events, you've got to do a little study in the book of Daniel. And then it'll reflect on the things that are also in Revelation. There's lots of minor prophets that have lots of things in there too, along with Isaiah. But Daniel prophesies these things just unbelievable, hundreds of years before they take place. Daniel chapter 8, verse 9, and the king has had a vision. And in this vision, you can read it later, but Daniel is given an explanation. Verse 9, actually verse 8, therefore the male goat grew very great. But when he became strong, the large horn was broken. And this is talking about the Grecian Empire, and it's talking about Alexander the Great. You might know who that is, Alexander the Great. Then Alexander the Great, when he died, had 4 generals that took over all of his territory. So that's kind of giving you something in brief here. It says, and in its place of it, 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. So we saw one large horn, Alexander the Great. He was amazing general, swift, taking over things. Daniel has, the kings have different visions, and it's of different eras of time. And first was the Babylonians, then came the Medes and Persians, then came the Greeks, and then came the Romans. So that's kind of where the kingdoms are. You're going to give you a brief thing. And out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. That glorious land, or beautiful land, if you have an NIV, it's talking about Israel. And it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. We'll read about that in Revelation 12. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. Otherwise, he said that I am the God of Israel, of God's people. And by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifice, and he cast truth down to the ground. He did all this and prospered. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said, that certain one who was speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled under his feet? And he said, how long is this going to go on? And he said, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Down in verse 23, to let you know that this wasn't going to happen right away. And it says, in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall arise. Ultimately the Antichrist, but at this time it will be a man named Antiochus Epiphanes IV. There's your little name. He's going to be a real king at this time, but he's going to be an image or a look at what the end time king's going to be like, the Antichrist. Now this guy's not nice, but the Antichrist is going to even be worse. And he says, and in the latter time their kingdom, and the king shall arise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. Otherwise, he's not a nice guy. He doesn't play by any of the rules. And maybe a little bit like Putin. You stand up against Putin, just go ahead and dig the hole beforehand, because that's where you'll end up. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He's not only energized by the flesh, he's energized by Satan. He can do powers, he can do miracles, he can do all kinds of things. Matter of fact, he's even gonna be shot and they think he's dead, and guess what? He rises back from the grave. Remember, Satan is an imitator. You have the unholy trinity and you have the holy trinity. He always is an imitator, and he does things for evil. He shall destroy fearfully and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people, and he'll have a devastating effect upon that. Verse 25, through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule, and he shall exalt himself in his heart. Otherwise, this man is sure he's got it. He's proud. He's cocky. He's all those things. He's arrogant and evil. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the Prince of Princes, which is Jesus Christ. But he shall be broken without human means. And the vision of the evening and morning which was told is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. So see, he said this is many days in the future these things are going to happen. So Antiochus Epiphanes, I got a little note out of the NIV Study Bible. I want you to read about him a little bit here. It says, that's another horn, verse 9, emerges not from the 10 horns belonging to the fourth kingdom, but rather from one of the 4 horns belonging to the third kingdom. That horn that started small is Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who during the last few years of his reign made a determined effort to destroy the Jewish faith. And that will be the Antichrist mission too, to destroy the nation of Israel. They hate God's people, and any Christians along the line are there too. Satan's still out there to do that today, right? He's seeking to see who he can destroy and to kill and devour. And he in turn served as a type of even more ruthless beast of the last days, who was also referred to in 7:8 as a little horn. Antiochus was to extend his power over Israel, the beautiful land, and defeat the godly believers there, referred to as the host of heaven, many of whom died for their faith. Then he set himself up to be equal of God and ordered the daily sacrifices to end. Eventually, the army of Judas Maccabeus recaptured Jerusalem and rededicated the temple. So you might know of the Maccabeans in that kind of situation. They came in and cleansed the temple at that time. And you can read that in the book of Maccabees. There's the first and second Maccabees as part of the Apocrypha. Now, that's not equated to equal with God's Word, but there's history there. History in those books that teach us about some of those things. That's a lot of information. Hopefully we can put it in perspective as we go along. Back to Mark, as we want to get to a moment here when we can take part in the communion. I don't want to rush that time, but Matthew 13. So we see the Antichrist setting up an image that people might worship him and worship Satan, taking the worship away from God where it should be and placed upon the evil one. And he says, when you see this take place, get out of Dodge. That's what he's saying. When you see this, all hell's about to break loose. It is going to really get bad. God's judging this nation. Satan's sending his demonic activity upon this earth, and it is miserable. People are dying everywhere. Remember, we got people sick. We got no food. You can only buy food if you got a mark of the beast. It's just an ugly, ugly time. He says that's part of the purging of this world. And remember, the next time they'll be saying, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. When Jesus comes back to set up that kingdom, they'll be ready. The nation of Israel will be ready. They'll be saying, we need him back. And that's what he says. This is a terrible time. If it starts happening, don't even go back home and pack your luggage. I want you to head off. And that's what he tells them there. And in verse 14, let the reader understand. But then it says in verse 19, for in those days there will be tribulation such as not been since the beginning of the creation, which God created until this time, nor ever shall be. You ain't seen nothing yet. We've seen some ugly scenes. We've seen ugly massacres. As a matter of fact, they're even finding some of those mass graves. I just saw where they dug up another one over there in Ukraine, where hundreds of people have just been assassinated, and these were burned and stuck in a grave. And you know that happened during the Nazi Holocaust with the Germans. That's also happened with Russia and one of their movements back in those days. You study history. But this is going to be worse than anything. Worse than anything you've ever seen. And Jesus says, just pray for the pregnant women. Pray that they're not in the middle of giving childbirth when all this starts taking place. Pray that it's not wintertime. We all know about that, right? And pray the snow's not up to you. And then flee. And then Some people say, well, where are they fleeing? Well, in Revelation 12, we won't turn there for time today, but we will when we get back together next time. They fled into the wilderness or into the desert. A lot of people believe, a lot of good men believe they're heading to a place called Petra. In the Bible, it's first called Selah. But it's Petra. It's 70 miles southeast of the Dead Sea. It's a narrow ravine, about 12 to 20 feet wide, that goes 1.5 miles into the mountain. The sides as it goes in are 200 feet high. A perfect place where God is going to, a bunch of those folks are going to flee and God's going to protect them there. If they can get there. Matter of fact, Satan will even try to flood them out. I'm giving you a lot of information that's not included here, but he's going to try to get a river to go right in there and flood them out. He said there's got to be some way to get to those people. But when God protects people, guess what? There's no way to get in there. There's no way to get in there. And you know, he's protecting those 144,000 men who are out preaching the gospel. He protects them. And he will protect his people. That's why I believe with all my heart that God's going to protect you from the wrath to come. Because you are God's children and God's family. He's going to take you out of here. I can show you from lots of scriptures I believe that is true. And Revelation says they're going to go there for a time, a times and a half. That's 3.5 years. That's the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period. They're going to flee there because in the middle, remember, this guy says, and you will worship me. And those people say, no, we won't. We will not bend the knee. We will not take your mark. We will not worship you. And they flee. And to Petra, many believe. Christ, remember, is our rock. That's what that word means, Petra, rock, refuge. He is our rock and our refuge. Flee to him during those times.